Welcome into Floyd Street's Finest. I am Jack Grossman. Just me tonight reacting to Louisville falling at home to number 9 Duke. The Cards gave a valiant effort. They really did, but not enough to knock off a very, very, very talented Devils group, falling 76 to 65. In this one, we're going to dive right into it. Probably just going to go, you know, recording it Sunday night right after the game. So just some instant reactions, give some quick thoughts, and just go ahead, get some thoughts, get on out of here tonight as Louisville again falls to Duke. You can like, subscribe, all that stuff. Floyd Treat's Finest, part of the Field of 68 Podcast Network. You can find us on Twitter at Floyd Street F68. I'm on Twitter at Jack Grossman97, Blue Sky at Jack Grossman. Like, subscribe, all that stuff over on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, however you are consuming this podcast here, probably Monday morning, or if you're listening on Sunday night, we appreciate the late night crowd as well as always. So let's go ahead and get right into it. This was a game that, to be completely honest, went about how I thought it would. I really thought Louisville, after the way that the Ole Miss game went on Tuesday night, they were going to come out. Desperation probably isn't the right word on December 8th, but come out with a lot of intensity, a lot of fire, a lot of energy, and really throw a really good opening punch on Duke. I thought they were going to be able to have that early. We saw them hit some shots. Obviously, they hit a bunch of threes early on as well, which helped things. But Louisville's intensity, especially on the defensive end, was so big early on as they built that 14-point lead. But really, I think the big key to this game, everyone's going to look at the second half, kind of what happened late in the game. Duke goes on the 15-2 run after Cooper Flagg gets his fourth foul of the game, and that's really where they created that separation. But to me, the big part, and really what ended up costing Louisville the game more than anything, came actually in that first half where they were shooting the lights out and really playing the best ball we've seen them play all year. Because the way Louisville was shooting the ball, we talked about it so much, Coach Lieberman and I, last time out. It's been such a big discourse with Louisville media, fans, and everyone around the team that follows the team to this point so far this year. Louisville shooting around 27% from three so far this season. Sunday night, they shot the lights out of the ball early on. They hit 8 of their first 11 three-point shots. However, and they were, again, phenomenal shooting the ball, phenomenal defensively. Chucky Hepburn was wreaking havoc on both ends of the floor. He looked like an All-American guard yet again on Sunday night. But when Louisville was 8 of 11 from three, yes, at one point they led by 14, but the point where they were 8 of 11 from three, they only led that game 30-21. And that was with about 7 or so minutes left in the first half, where Louisville had really thrown their opening punch to only be up by 9 after that. And you look at everything from the shooting to the defense to the energy to even the rebounding. Louisville was out rebounding Duke at that point. They held their own on the glass throughout the game, which big credit to Louisville. I didn't think they would be able to do that. But what kept Duke in the game early and what fueled their run late was the turnovers. Louisville shot itself in the foot so many times in this game. 15 turnovers within itself is not a ginormous number, but when the turnovers were absolutely killer for Louisville. When you're shooting the lights out like that, shooting 73% of that point of the game from three, 8 of 11 again, and you're doing everything right, the last thing you want to do is to give away possession, to give up buckets on the other end. I mean, Duke had, I think it was Tyrese Proctor hit a three and Mason Gillis hit that three to cut the lead to 30-21 at that point. But with the way Louisville was playing and how well they looked early on in that game, it felt like they should have been up 18 to 20 points. And why is that important? Because yes, it was still good to be up 9. It was good to have the 4-point lead or whatever it was at halftime. And it was nice to have the early 14-point lead. But when Louisville wasn't able to extend that anymore, we kind of saw it earlier today with Kansas and Missouri, to be completely honest, where Missouri led the game by 24. Kansas comes out a furious comeback, but Missouri had built up enough of a cushion to where Kansas never fully got all the way up the mountain, and Missouri was able to hold them off. We knew, and that's not an apples-to-apples comparison because Missouri's not nearly as shorthanded as Louisville is, but we knew, number one, after the Duke Auburn game on Wednesday, where Auburn threw a very similar early punch, led that game like 13-2 or something. That Duke isn't just going to lie down. They're going to battle back, and they did battle back. Back to their credit, they handled, the road crowd. They handled, the adversity on their end. They were able to come back, make plays, and end up winning the game. But when you're Louisville, and one, you're playing shorthanded with really a 7-man rotation. You're playing a lot of dudes, a lot of minutes. And that's something that is not Pat Kelsey's fault. That's very injury prone, and that's what's caused it. But Pat Kelsey's very clearly not going to change who he is. And I would argue that's the right choice because you're trying to establish a program and establish a way to play your style. Just because you got some injuries, I think, as we showed tonight, when it works, it's still going to work. And you can win a lot of games, even with just those 7 dudes playing the way that Pat Kelsey wants to play. But when you're playing a team like Duke, who's going to go 9-10 deep and is going to keep coming at you in waves and is so athletic and can overwhelm you on that end, when you have things going, you can't give up free possessions because we knew Louisville was going to fatigue down the stretch. We knew a lot of it was going to be, okay, can they hang on to whatever lead they could build up? That was kind of, compared to horse racing, Louisville in this game was very much the front runner that you use the early speed to get out early. And the question is, can you do enough early on to where no one can catch you on the back end when you race down the stretch? Duke was the horse that came from behind and passed the tiring leader. That was Louisville. But when you're Louisville, you can't afford any mistakes early on when you're trying to build that lead. When you're 8-11 for 3 and you're hitting everything you throw up, you can't give away 7 possessions. You can't give Duke extra looks. When you're that locked in defensively, you can't give up transition buckets. It's killer. It's absolutely killer for you as a defense and as a team trying to keep that lead to where Louisville's only up 4 at halftime. If when they're up 9, if they were up 16, 18, 20 points, maybe Duke cuts into it a little bit more and you're still up 12, 13 at half, that is a much harder hill to climb for Duke than a 4-point halftime deficit after, you had shot lights out for the first 12, 13 minutes or so. Because again, we talked so much about positive regression. We saw that early on with all the made threes. But when you're 8 of 11 from 3, that's, where the water finds its level, it works against you a little bit too. You're not going to keep shooting over 75% from 3. That's not how this works. You're going to eventually cool down, especially once Duke, as talked about earlier, they're going to have stretches where they are the best defensive team in the country. They use the athleticism. They really make it hard for you to run stuff. And we saw that in the second half where they were much more locked in on that end of the floor than they were in the first half, where Louisville was able to get into their actions a lot quicker and a lot more effectively than they did in that second half. Even when you get some open shots, you're not going to hit nearly as many of them. Many of us. Louisville, I believe, after starting 8 for 11, they finished 10 of 31, I think it was from 3. 11 of 31. So they were 3 of 20 after starting the game 8 for 11, which comes out 11 31, 35%. You still take that. That's a good 3-point shooting night. Not phenomenal, but good enough to win a lot of games. But you need, when you're hitting those threes in bunches, you got to build a big cushion. And Louisville, just because of the turnovers, weren't able to hold on to it. I mean, if you want it just simple as that, Louisville lost the game by 11 points. They were outscored in points off turnovers 20-8, 12 points. That's statistically, if you want to cherry pick stats, you lost the game by 11 points off turnovers. You're outscored by 12. There you go, right there. Louisville on the other end, only able to force 7 turnovers. We talked about this as well last week with Coach Lieberman. I really thought they were going to struggle to force a lot of turnovers because of how well Duke takes care of the ball and how much they initiate offense through Cooper Flagg, through Zion James, through a lot of their, bigger front court players, which in theory could limit a lot of Chucky Hepburn's effectiveness, but to be completely honest, it really didn't. Then he was spectacular on both ends of the ball, even though they weren't able to force a lot of turnovers. He was harassing guys. He was pressuring the ball. He was heating up the offense. He was pushing the Duke offense out, doing so much. He was so active. There was that one possession in the first half where he pushes the ball handler out close to the half court logo, and then is able to sprint and disrupt a pass at the elbow, flare out and cover a guy on the wing, and then dive back in under the basket and deflect the ball away out of bounds. All in about a 6-second span. Like you don't teach that. That is a level of effort and intensity and emotion and an ability to disrupt an opposing offense that is just it's special on Chucky Hepburn's side, to be completely honest. I really do. I said it earlier. I think he's an All-American right now, the way he's played so far this year. He may not get that recognition at this point, and I don't really think that really matters to a lot of people. But I'm struggling to find 3 or 4 better guards in the country that are better than what Chucky Hepburn's done in the first month of the season. He's been absolutely spectacular for Louisville. But going back to the main point with the turnovers, 7 of them came in the first half when you're in those first 13 minutes when you were shooting the lights out. And another bunch of them came when Cooper Flagg was on the bench with 4 fouls and helped really fuel that Duke 14-2 run that really broke the game open for them. So that was the big story to me. Had to take better care of the ball. They didn't do it. That's simple as that. But there were other areas. I thought defensively, even though they weren't able to force turnovers, they did a much better job on the defensive end than I thought they were going to be able to. They just, again, intensity, effort, all these things that are very qualitative and not quantitative, just looked night and day different from Ole Miss into Duke. And really, this is kind of a referendum on Louisville because now we've seen it. One, we saw it in the Bahamas against Indiana, West Virginia, and Oklahoma. But that was with Case and Pryor. So you can say, excuse me, okay, will they be able to play with this level of intensity on the defensive end without that guy? Will they be able to rebound without that guy, which they had struggled even with Case and Pryor and Traore rebounding the ball even before both those guys got hurt. Traore again will be coming back at some point from the broken arm, but Pryor's out for the year with the torn ACL. Could they do those 2 things to stay in games enough to be able to give themselves chances to win, despite being that shorthanded and being undersized? We've seen now playing the most talented team they're going to play all year, playing the biggest team they're going to play all year with Malak and Cooper Flagg, Malik Brown, Knipple, so much size, positional size, especially for Duke in this game. Could we see Louisville maybe not excel is the right word, but hold their own and really give a battle on that end of the floor? And we've seen it now against Duke. So we've seen it without Case and Pryor. We've seen it without Traore. Okay, so now the question becomes, how can you bottle that up and play with that level of intensity consistently? Because we've seen it flip-flop back and forth now a few times. So where Tennessee, they clearly didn't have it. The Bahamas, they definitely did have it. Ole Miss, they did not have it. But then you come back and you prove, even shorthanded, you can play with that level of emotion and effort and intensity. And that's really the word of this podcast is intensity for Louisville, to where I say, okay, you go on the road to Kentucky, you better bring it. There's no excuses to not be bringing it. You play Florida State on the road, quad 1 game, you got to bring it. North Carolina, come to the Yum Center January 1st, you have to have that energy. There's no excuses for them to be inconsistent on that end of the floor when it comes to how hard they play. Are you going to get out talented sometimes? Are you just going to get out muscled because you're not very big? Are you going to get fatigued sometimes? Yes, probably. But you've shown now in 4 different games that you can hold your own on that end of the floor, including on the rebounding battle, where you only got out-rebounded by 36-35 against a Duke team that's one of the better rebounding teams in the country, and again, is the second tallest team per Ken Pom in the country. So much talk has been about the defensive glass. That's been my biggest worry for Louisville all season long is how do you handle the defensive glass? How do you clean up possessions? UofL, Duke missed 34 shots in this game and only had 6 offensive rebounds off those 34 shots. That's 17.6% offensive rebounding rate. Louisville in the season been giving up over 30% offensive rebound rate. Right, that's really good. That's something you can build on. And a big reason for that is because, number one, James Scott was able to actually stay on the floor, stay out of foul trouble, which has been a huge key for him. He had 8 rebounds on the day, and he was really effective on both ends of the floor. He was really good finishing around the rim. He had that one finish where Chucky hit him early in that second half with a beautiful one-handed bounce pass, and he makes a good catch, which is a tough thing for a big man to do, and then he finishes for an and one through Cooper Flag with all that size and length and athleticism. James Scott was able to finish it and one through Cooper Flag. That was really impressive. We saw him, yes, he had four fouls, but he played 26 minutes to get those four fouls. That is huge for James Scott to be able to play 26 minutes and huge for Louisville for him to play that many minutes. The foul trouble's been an issue. As I said, 5.1 fouls per 40 minutes coming into this game. If you ask Pat Kelsey, four fouls, 26 minutes every single game, he'd probably take that from James Scott because Louisville, when he's on the floor, just isn't nearly as small as they are when he's out there. He's their one true, like, okay, I'm 6'9", 6'10". Not that I'm going to be a low block presence, but he's by far the best shot blocking presence, and I think he's the best rebounder of who's available on the Louisville roster right now. And Connie Roos, I thought, played his best game as a Cardinal, not only hitting a couple threes and really stretching the floor for U of L, also grabbing 6 rebounds and not being intimidated by all Duke's talent on the other end. Those two dudes are going to be huge keys for Louisville moving forward, and that was the whole discussion. I mean, I had that conversation with someone on Twitter at Jack Grossman 97, another shameless plug there. Can Louisville hold their own on that end of the floor without Case and Pryor? And the question was, Scott and Roots are the two guys that got to step up, but Roots hadn't proven it yet. He still has to prove it more consistently, but tonight was a great start. Sunday night, rather, was a great start. And James Scott, to this point, hadn't been able to stay out of foul trouble. If you can get Scott to stay on the floor and Roots to give you something every night, then you don't have to go nearly as small where you're having Terrence Edwards or Javon Hadley having to guard a 6'10 Cooper Flag, which is a very tough thing to do. I still think there's a place for Louisville to do that. But you saw how much success they had offensively with that small ball lineup when they were hitting shots, and Edwards did a really good job attacking at Flag, getting him to foul trouble, attacking Mason Gillis, and he was the game. Malik Brown's a little bit different story, but Malik Brown is one of the best defenders in college basketball, to be completely honest. So I'm not going to knock him too much for that part. But if you're able to mix it up a little bit, because that's where Corin Johnson being hurt also, you can't just play Chucky, Rain Smith, Hadley, and Edwards all together for all 40 minutes either. You're going to have to get those guys rest as well. Roos and Scott are so incredibly important. You got to get Waterman going too, which of all the dudes that hit shots and really kind of broke out of that slump early on, he was kind of the one dude that didn't. He was still, he missed his only 2 threes he took. He only had 1 point of the night. 4 rebounds, but he wasn't as effective as Scott and Roos when they were both in the game there. But if you can get Scott and Roos going consistently, that raises the ceiling even more for this team. And we saw, even in a loss, we saw that from Louisville today. I don't want to go full moral victory Monday here for U of L, but with honestly where the program's been the last few years and kind of, where they were injury riddled after the Bahamas and how the Ole Miss game went, there were legitimate questions. Okay, can this team get off the mat and prove that they're still going to battle for an NCAA tournament spot? And the answer to that question is a resounding yes. And now you have opportunities coming up the rest of the month and early into January to go out and prove it. So that's going to be the big question. Can James Scott stay out of foul trouble? Can Roos, continue to give you that punch? And is this, even though the second half they didn't shoot the ball nearly as well, was this the start of that positive regression for Louisville to be able to get going from 3? Because that's going to be a big thing for them. They're going to need to shoot the ball better than they have so far this year. And I still believe they can and they will. And Sunday night was hopefully the start of that for Louisville. So I know this is a lot shorter than we normally do it, but just me writing solo, spitting stuff off here. That's pretty much all I got, though, for you guys tonight. Kentucky week, obviously, coming up. UTEP on Wednesday as well. That UTEP game is an absolute trap game. It just is. They're 150th in KenPom, but absolutely no one outside of the locker room and the coaching staff is going to be talking about that one with Pat Kelsey, Mark Pope. First edition of the Battle of the Bluegrass for both coaches coming up in Lexington on Saturday. That's going to be spectacular. Kentucky looked I know a lot of people on this podcast, listen to this podcast, aren't going to like it, but they looked really, really, really spectacular coming back to beat Gonzaga in Seattle on Saturday night. And I think that's going to be a very, very, very fun game to where I think Jackie Hepburn to be the best player on the floor in that game. And I think that's Louisville's best path to win is they need Chucky Hepburn to be the best player on the floor. Both teams are banged up. We know Louisville's story. Kirk Risa was announced early on Sunday. He's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks. Lamont Butler, I've been told he's supposed to be back. That's obviously going to make a big difference whether he plays or not. But Jackson Robinson did a really good job for Kentucky filling in that primary ball handler role after Creasy got hurt in that Gonzaga game. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be breaking that one down. We'll be with Coach Lieberman, reacting more to this Duke game previewing Kentucky as well later in the week. Might have one or two other special things coming up as well to get ready for Louisville, Kentucky Battle of the Bluegrass. You'll have to stay tuned on that one. That's what they call a radio tease back in the days of the business there. But for now, Louisville falls to Duke. 76-65. Stay tuned all week. We'll be talking more about this and, of course,